Hello, everyone. Many years ago, I made a review or a video at least. I don't know if it was a review, but I kind of like talked about Castles and Crusades. And I kind of wanted to do another video that is not necessarily an introduction to Castles and Crusades, but just some new thoughts I've had through the years about Castles and Crusades. And I kind of wanted to approach how like not long ago I kind of posted something on Twitter where I brought up, and the Twitter is, by the way, Chronicles of the Crimson Hound. It's the Twitter page for my actual play channel, Chronicles of Crimson Hound, by the way, on YouTube as well. It's a different channel from this one. Um, but I kind of posted that my opinion that if you have like old school players, old school D&D players, whatever edition, and players who prefer 5e, that it would be a really good idea to run Castles and Crusades, where I feel like you could kind of like make everyone happy with it. Well, not necessarily everyone. Of course, you'll always have like the extremes, but I feel like Castles and Crusades, it's like this perfect in between old school and new school, and it's actually kind of my favorite version of the six attribute system where you roll a d20. And I kind of want to go over like what's old school and what's new school and how that works. And interestingly enough, some of those aspects kind of cross over. Like facets of Castle and Crusades make it perfect for both. Again, I do mean as something where I don't want to use the word compromise because that sounds negative, but I really feel like this is a system where you can kind of like, if you have like a divided group, you can really run something where everyone will feel fairly happy with it. Um, Now the power level of this is kind of like, I think I never played the advanced games. Oh, I did play advanced a long time ago once, you know. What I've mostly played is 3 point whatever third edition slash Pathfinder and BX and Castles and Crusades. But my understanding is that power level wise, this is around advanced D&D, and I'm gonna go over like what makes it new school and old school. So what makes it new school, although that all of old school players also do that, is it separates races and classes. So for anyone who wants that distinction, you don't want to, you do not want to do a race as class. It separates them. Um, and for those who feel like, well, I feel like it differentiates those fantasy races from humans if they're their own class. If they Castles and Crusades does give bonuses and all that to certain fantasy races who choose certain classes, and so you kind of still have that mood going on where um, like elves are very inclined to do certain things, etc. Um, but it does differentiate the classes in the race. Now, let's see. So that's new school, although in between, I guess, almost. Um, then what is new school is a unified mechanic. And by the way, long before official D&D with 5 edition decided to go with attributes for the saving throws, Castles and Crusades was already doing that. So Castles and Crusades was already doing that. I want to emphasize that. Back in 2003 or whenever it is that they started doing these books. I forget now, but it's been a long time. Um, so there's a unified mechanic. However, it leaves a lot of room for the GM to make decisions. Like it's not like it has a rule covering everything. So you have both the case of new players liking to have a unified mechanic. If you roll a d20 for attacks, they don't like to roll a d6 for skills, and maybe they hit it even more if some skills are d6 and the other ones are d100. So new players like to have a unified mechanic. Everything goes off the d20. However, it's done in a way where you have like kind of like this template for how to do things, but the game master decides how to apply it, what attribute will be pertinent. So it's kind of like this mechanic that should make everyone happy in that sense, that it's unified for the new players, but it leaves room for the game master to make decisions that fit the situation, instead of having like codified rules for every single thing, which is something that old school players will appreciate, because then it kind of leaves it open for them to think of ideas, and then the game master can make a ruling about it, which is the whole thing about old school. The only thing about that where I can imagine maybe some new school players not liking it is those who it's not, but I feel like it's a bit of a bad attitude to have, but those players who don't trust the game master. You know what I mean? Like they really like that there's rules for everything, because they don't want the game master to have too much power over the game, which to me is a very adversarial relationship with your game master, who you're supposed to trust. And if you don't trust your game master, play another game. You know, like go find another group. But whatever. Let's say for people who, act in ways that make sense, it's a good in between. I don't want to go too much over the actual rules. For that, you can always go check out my older video about Castles and Crusades. Actually, I think I might have made more than one. I think I made one about Castles and Crusades itself, and another one about its saving throws. I think. Anyway, I don't remember my old videos that much right now. Um, Another thing that I like, and again, it should make everyone happy, is that new players love to customize a lot. Old school players like to just be able to create a character sheet quickly, and they'll customize their character through their characterization and their decisions in game, not through their statistics. And new school players like to have their ideas represented through statistics, and there's no wrong way to handle that. Like both have their value and their reasons for it, and that's perfectly fine. And what I like about Castles and Crusades is you get both at the same time. There's no compromise between both. Like it is exactly, you get to customize characters to a surprising degree with a very simple mechanic that doesn't take time. You don't have to choose a lot of skills or whatever. The way it works is that everything is derived from the attributes, the saving throws, the skills, the class abilities. Everything is derived from the 6 attributes. That means that let's say that you want to play a really smart fighter who is very intellectual and very learned and things like that. In this game you get to choose prime attributes in which you're going to roll better, which might sound familiar to 5e players, because 5th edition kind of like, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but I think they took the idea from Castles and Crusades. Now, I've never played 5e, so I'm not exactly sure how that goes, but I know there's proficiency bonuses in 5e. So it's kind of like that, I think, where when you take, I'm going to choose my primes, and humans get more primes because they don't have the abilities that other races have. But, any non-human gets 2 primes out of the 6, and humans get 3 primes. That's what they get for not seeing in the dark and stuff like that. And with those attributes, you're just gonna be better at them. No matter the attribute score, the target number that you have to reach is much lower, so you're better at that. So let's say you want to make like a detective fighter, without even having to multi-class. You just take intelligence as a prime ability. Let's say you want to do like a strong wizard. You just take prime, strength as your prime, and even if, and again, now this is going to be interesting. The old school players seem to not want attribute scores to be too powerful in the game, whereas new school players seem to really like optimizing attribute scores for the class they picked. And again, this is kind of interesting because this does both, where it sounds contradictory, but it really does both, in the sense that for old school players, like, you can kind of use the even if you get bad rolls, you can kind of use the primes to make the character like very usable. Or if you don't like just overpowering one attribute score, you can always like just put the prime in a lower attribute, and still you're gonna be pretty decent at that. So the whereas for new players, they can really optimize by, like, I don't know, they got an 18 in Constitution, and that's what they put their prime on top of that, So the Constitution rolls will all be amazing. However, so for them, however, you might have neglected other places where your saving throws might not be as good after all. So and the way at first I didn't like it, actually, that aspect, but to me it makes sense as I Over the years, I did a lot of well, not during the pandemic, but over the years I was doing a lot of martial arts, and I do mean like with physical resisting opponents, like grappling and MMA with striking, and so I've been sparring with people and all that. And what you come to realize is one thing is having strength, and the other in grappling, for example, and the other is knowing how to use that strength, knowing how to use the leverage and all that. Um, and I've even seen like friends who are considerably physically, like they look stronger than other people, than me, for example, but they have more trouble lifting things just because they don't know how to find the proper angles for this. Anyway, so my point being that maybe someone has a strength of 18 and doesn't have it as a prime. That means that yeah, they sure have a lot of raw strength, but they don't know how to. They're not educated in how to use it exactly. Whereas someone might have like a strength of 13, but have it as a prime because they have really learned how to apply their strength and leverage. So, for example, in the saving throws, let's see. So what's really fun in the character sheet is it tells you like which abilities attribute goes with which saving throw. So if you're using old school material, and it says like, oh, it's do a save versus breath weapon. I mean, okay, that's obviously like dexterity, right? That one, but you can look at the category and and if you're using your material, then it's just like the attribute. But it's kind of fun that they did both. Like you have the attributes, but you also have like gaze attack. Like, and I like that in charisma. I'm getting a bit off track, but death attack, charm, and fear are saves that you do with charisma. So death attack. So charisma is no longer a dumb stat because that's kind of important. Um, yeah. So like if a monster can kill you on sight, like you roll charisma to save, not constitution. Because it's a supernatural attack. Constitution more for disease, energy drain, and poison. Well, energy drain could also be supernatural, but whatever. I guess they had to balance out the attributes. What was I saying? Okay. So strength is paralysis and constriction. So doing grappling, I have come across people who are like literally bodybuilders that had trouble against more normal sized people in grappling. Like so, and it's kind of funny to see, but they don't know how to apply their strength in that aspect. They don't know where to put the leverage, and so this huge, like Conan looking guy, trying to hold on to this normal person. The normal person just escaping easily and then choking them. Like it's, and I roll with that guy at some point, and the guy just kind of like rushed me and like tackles me, but he leaves his neck exposed, so I just choked him right away in a guillotine choke, and it's kind of like he even took me down, but I went along with it because I wanted to be in that position to finish the guillotine. So just and I had to use minimal strength. So in so it makes sense if you train to use your strength, then you're actually better at using it than someone who might have a bigger score actually. But then nevertheless, let's say you're hitting something, the bigger strength score is going to be more pertinent, even if you train or not. And whether it's your prime or not, the moment I don't know that sword attack hits, yeah, the person with the biggest strength score is still hitting harder, which also makes sense. Anyway, so I find it's kind of like that sweet middle ground between, yeah, the ability scores mean something, but also they're not like the be all end all. Or you can optimize if you want, but you can also just make choices that make sense to you. Now, the part where I was talking about customization and making characters quick is really that you just choose the primes. You choose your class, you choose your race, and then you choose the primes, and that's it. There's no skill points to put anywhere. There's no feats to put anywhere. And that might sound less appealing to newer players, but in reality, when you choose that prime, you're basically choosing all of those things that you normally would have chosen. When you put your prime in intelligence for your fighter, that's all the knowledge skills that your fighter would have had normally. Like you just chose your intelligence and you're ready to go. and then you get to apply it in a much more story-centric way. And another thing that's very new school is that anyone can try anything. Like anyone can try to climb a wall, whether they're a thief or not, or a rogue in this book. Their terminology of Castles and Crusades is more updated. So anyone can try it. It's just maybe they don't get to add their level to their rolls. Which again, if you're a 5e player, it's the proficiency bonus, I think. Um, so yeah, it's just it's just a. This is an older printing, by the way. They came out with a new printing. And again, if you want to talk about new school and it's something to be addressed, they did add a lot more. What do you say? Variety in whose representation in their new printing. I've noticed, like in the art and all that. So that's also very new school. If you're showing the book to new players who might be a bit reluctant to go into old school games because they might have like some misconceptions about going old school. Like for some people now, hearing old school is like this warning. It seems. If you show them Castles and Crusades, it's really they can really see it's still a very modern game despite its old school inclinations. Now, where it is really, it's kind of funny. It's both at the same time depending on the class. Where it's new school is that fighters will have a D10, not D8, for their hit points, and they definitely have a lot of like special attacks and such, like special things that make them really good at fighting. Which, in my opinion, is kind of like a flaw in BX that the fighter doesn't do that much, except for the attack bonus. So I think that's good because that let's say that the fighter in BX kind of suffers. Um, so in new school terms, like the fighters do, like in the combat classes do stuff. In old school terms, when you're playing a spellcaster, it's like a wizard or an illusionist. It's D4. It's not D6 or whatever. So that's old school, and you don't have unlimited spells. There's a limited amount of magic you can do in a day. That's old school. So depending on the class, you have this like shift of new school and old school. So depending which class you like to play in, whether you're old school or new school, you might have different feelings about how you perceive this game. But even then, like if you're gonna do a combat class, it feels new school. If you're doing spellcasting, it does go to level 9 in spells. The spells hit harder, so it's not like you're not gonna be like powerful enough given due time, but you do start like old school with like that D4 hit points. What else? Well, this is really easy to use with whatever version of the D&D or 6 attributes D20 you want. Like it's really usable. Maybe for traditions, the odd man out, but that's kind of a weird one. But every other version of D&D, you can easily run modules and adventures or whatever edition with this, and you can convert on the fly. You really can do that. If you're someone who doesn't like unified mechanics, you like to have weird like the skills that are D6 and 100%, you can always add that. There's no reason why you can't take the rogue and just go, you know what, I'm so old school, I kind of like to do skills differently. Nothing, because it's so simple and clean in its base form and version, you can easily add a skill system that's not even D20 based if you want. Nothing's gonna like break in the game for that. So you can really, this is pretty old school, you can really customize it. Other books for Castles and Crusades, like the Castle Keeper's Guide, because the game masters are called Castle Keepers. They give you like potential rules for action dice or chance points, so you can certainly make the game more modern in its in the power of the players. You can boost them up if you want. So that's another easy fix if players are used to not being killed easily. Let's say. You can go with those rules. Although this game also, like, you have to go to -10 before you're killed. So it's not like it's kind of funny because in some ways it's modern and it's hard to die as long as at least your friends are still standing and can pick you up. However, at the same time, it still has like death saving throws. And if you didn't put your prime in the saving throw that you need at that moment, it might be very old school in that sense. So again, you kind of get a taste of both. I feel like it's a good game to pick up. First of all, just in itself, I think it's my favorite version of D&D. You know, it's not an official version, but it's my favorite edition, or what, rule set, whatever you want to call it. Um, Maybe I shouldn't say D&D, but Open Gaming License. It came along like at a time when OSR wasn't even a thing yet. You know, um, the only people who might not like it are people who are like really strongly steadfast in like basic D&D, because advanced players will like this, I'm sure. But like steadfast basic D&D, where like death is at zero, and you know, like very like cannot move from that. And people who are like just 5e, and you know, like I got someone commenting where I didn't even fight with them. Like it was just, I think it's perfectly cool for people to play 5e, but the person kind of like was bothered that I said like, oh, if you have old school and new school players, you can choose this, you know. And the person kind of went on this like very, maybe it's my way of reading it, but I felt like he was kind of like in this enemy position with me, where he was kind of saying like, hey, I'm an old school player and I run 5e. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That you kind of missed my point, I think. But but and that person meant old school, as in they've been playing for a long time. But by my definition of old school player, I mean players who use old school rules. You can have been playing role playing games for 6 months, but if you use an old school rule, I'm gonna kind of when I say you play an old school style of the game, yeah. But I think it's just extremes. People who just like will do nothing but 5e, or people who like as soon as you introduce like a bit more survivability or a bit more hit points, they're out of it. They're like, nah, I don't want this. Yeah. If you don't have any extremes, if you have just like normal players who might prefer this version and this other version, like Castles and Crusades, and just you know even this is kind of like almost like a hipster reason, like oh we were doing that before it was cool. Also, I kind of wish people would buy Castles and Crusades only because a lot of stuff that 5e is doing, they were doing it first, like more than a decade before. They were doing the attribute scores as saving throws, like it's kind of like when they were talking about when they were doing D&D Next, you know, what became D&D Fifth Edition. A lot of Castles and Crusades players were laughing that it sounded very similar to Castles and Crusades, based on attribute scores, proficiency bonuses, instead of like, can you add your level or not if it's something that you're, you know, able to do and such. Like for example, like you can rule that anyone can try to open a lock if even if you're not a rogue, you just don't get to at your class level. Or maybe the game master decides that you can't with that log. It's up to the game master, which again, that's more cool. Okay, I didn't want to make the video that long, but I cannot recommend this game enough. If only because it's the perfect in-between game for a lot of people, or if only because if you're someone like me who kind of likes aspects of both, it hits the sweet spot without going too far in either direction, kind of like a centrist D&D. If only because a lot of stuff 5e is doing feels to me, without, I don't know, might be a coincidence, it feels to me like it was ripped off of Castles and Crusades. I really recommend you pick this up. Right now in the Troll Lord Games official store online, Troll Lord Games, they are giving one of the printings of the Player's Handbook for free. And Player's Handbook gives you everything you need to play the game, well, all the rules and all that, and whatever other you know, whatever other monster book you have of D&D, you can use with this. Trust me, you can. And they give it for free at PF. And there's a new printing coming, and it is full color. Like, you know, if this is something that matters to you, it does have more representation in it. So it's just, I really recommend it. I really think it's like I think it hit the sweet spot of where this game should be for me personally. I like BX, you know, and I've never touched 5e, not because I had anything against it when it came out, just because it sounded a lot like Castles and Crusades already, just a bit more powerful, and to me that was not a buying point. And if you watch my old video, Dear 5th Edition, old video, I kind of, at the time, 5th Edition didn't have the things I was looking for in D&D products. It was just kind of like the basic rule sets, and I already had enough of that sort of game, you know. I had Pathfinder, other games, like I didn't need another version yet. And since then, D&D has kind of like strayed very far away from um, like it's going so far away from what D&D used to be, which is not good or bad. It's just a fact that I didn't feel the need to pick it up. You know, and this is really the sweet spot for me, and I think it could be for a lot of people. I really think so. Couldn't recommend it enough. That's all. Thank you for watching.